Well, folks, it's only taken 13 attempts to get this interview to happen. My guest today is Keith Carrato, VP of Product at Leatherman. Keith, how are you?
Good, I'm good. I'm glad we can make this work.
You're an extremely patient and accommodating guest. Honestly,
That's all right.
the amount of unbelievable "the dog ate my homework" style excuses I've given you has been pretty pitiful, really.
I don't know that it's excuses. This is the beauty, though, of the dichotomy of electronics and like what we do at Leatherman, metal hand tools, right? Like it's this beautiful world we live in of the two opposites.
100%. I was thinking about you yesterday, and this is going to sound like such a weird use case, but one of our kids, in fact, both of our kids are autistic, and one of the really difficult things is basically toenail cutting. But
Yeah.
the scissors on the Leatherman Wave, which if you haven't got one, folks, buy one, because it is literally the best thing I ever got from an ex. Only thing I ever got from a previous relationship, but was the Leatherman Wave. And it's got an incredible pair of scissors. And the thing is that those things are sharp. Like they are
Yes.
so sharp.
They are very sharp. They are very sharp. And I love to hear that, first of all. So thank you for supporting. And not to plug, but I will give the team credit.
Let's get it in early.
The new one that we just came out with, the Wave Alpha, which came out last October, actually has even better scissors. Intentionally, one of the things that we designed to be improved.
You see, the other product that I was just seeing that you just released, I thought was really interesting. And I think am I pronouncing it correctly? The Other, is that the thing? Have I pronounced that correctly? Opener. Yeah, okay, fine.
Yep.
So essentially, folks, it's a little thing you attach to your keychain.
Yep.
And it has like 6 or 7 sort of different tools on it. Keith, just talk us through a little bit about the sort of, because you had quite a fast development time.
Very, very cool. This is one of the funnest things that I've done, and I didn't do it, but the fun of things I've been around in product for quite a while. It's a 4-tool keychain tool. So we have a package opener, a bottle opener, a pry bar, and then also a keychain hole, which you can use for storage of your keys, obviously. So the beauty of it was really smart, passionate people here came into my office on November 13th, and 2 people, and they had an idea. Hey, we found that we have a bunch of going to be scrap, really high quality steel at one of our vendors, but we own it. And we have some ideas of how we could make use of that. And I said, great, what does that look like? And they said, well, give us 1 day. So they did 6 hours of a design off, engineers, designers in a room on a Friday, a gazillion ideas, 3 prototypes that we actually made, 1 winner, and it went to market. It was in production 5 days after that initial conversation. So pretty cool. Yeah.
Wow. Tell me, how illustrative do you think that is about the future of your business? Because I imagine that there are quite long lead times when you're working with steel and with a raw material that presumably is very subject to the vagaries of international markets and tariffs and other things like that. Like, just talk to us a little bit about, without getting into the politics of it, but like how have the sort of all of the, because I mean, here in the UK, steel is a tiny industry, but still the thought that we might lose virgin steel production here in the UK is an enormous political issue.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, and avoiding the politics of it all, I think the reality of someone like us, who we manufacture all of our own goods, and we manufacture them literally right downstairs here in Portland, is the word I think of when I think through this issue is balance. What we have to do is find the right balance, right? And so there will always be products in our world that are super complex and super engineered. And, if you look at the tolerances of a product like this and all the different moving pieces and parts, and then realize that we have to also figure out how to manufacture it, that will always take some level of time, right? And while do I think we could be somewhat shorter in how much it currently takes us? Yeah. Do I think that's ever going to be 5 days? No. But we have to find some balance in being able to do more of those projects like we just talked about, the opener, where there's a market opportunity, a cultural moment, a brilliant idea, or whatever it is, and how do we quickly turn that to get it in the hands of consumers? And I think our challenge at Leatherman is we just got to find better balance. We're really good at the one, obviously, we've been doing it for 43 years. We just got to get better at refining our skills on the other.
I think what I was chatting to a colleague the other day, and they said, why is it called Leatherman? So over to you, Keith. Why is it called Leatherman?
It's a great story. So I'm a native Portlander. So I grew up in Portland and I grew up with this brand, knowing this brand. It is called Leatherman because our founder and the inventor of the original plier-based multi-tool is Tim Leatherman. So it's his real name. It's Tim. Tim is in this building probably a couple
It
times
sounds
a
like a
week.
sort of witness protection name,
It
if I'm
really
honest,
does.
Keith. It's
It
like,
really
if
does.
I was going to be in witness protection, that would be a
Yes.
name I would choose. But like, he's a genius inventor.
He is a genius inventor, a really nice person, a great owner, and someone who is just dedicated to, helping our company help other people, right? And so Tim and another gentleman, Steve Berliner, were kind of the original founders. Tim invented it after a whole trip through Europe where he had to fix a Fiat, which is actually, this sweatshirt is the license plate from the Fiat. There's all sorts of fun stories. But yeah, Tim, it's one of the coolest names, just Leatherman. And the number of people that don't realize it's actually a person's name versus just a branding is quite a few. So that's how we got our name.
You see, I absolutely love that. Folks will be interested to know that I will soon be changing my name to Outrageous Insight, which will be quite a strange way for my family to relate to me. But then again, when you're exactly, if you're not prepared to put a tattoo on yourself of your own business name, then basically you're not really a legit entrepreneur. Do you agree, Keith?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure. Shut the hell up, Patrick. I get it.
It's no. If you own the place, I'm good with that, right?
Yeah, definitely. As long as you're not forcing other people to like have the tattoo done without. Yeah, that's
well,
good.
Yeah. Because at my point in my career, I'd have a whole leg full of tattoos of different logos if that were the case.
Definitely, and we're going to be talking about that sort of decision, as is the sort of want in this podcast, about a decision that sort of changed everything for you. But just before we get into that, I wonder, just very briefly, just give us a sort of little insight into Keith as a young person. Like, what were you like? Like, were you like the sort of, were you like voted most likely to succeed, or were you like a sort of, like a nerd, or were you like, just give us a bit of a sort of a personal pen portrait into you as a young person?
Sure,
Keith.
Sure. I love to think in analogies, and I love music, so I think of it like an equalizer. I would say, younger me and probably still me, the nerd part was pretty high. I definitely had a studious side to me and did well academically, and I might have won Likely to Succeed. I'm not sure. I honestly don't remember. But there was a bit of a sports one, right? I grew up loving sports, playing soccer and basketball and that sort of thing. But then I liked putting together models when I was a kid, like little plastic, cars and boats and whatever it might be. And so I think if I were to think back to it, and also at one point I had dreams of being a sportscaster. And I used to sit in my bedroom with a little tape recorder. Some people listening to this might not even know what a tape is, but I would sit at my little desk with a tape recorder and I would write out the sports highlights for the day. And I would, by myself with the door closed, just hit play and record together and record a sportscast.
I absolutely love that. Yeah. It's so fun. I still remember the very first time I heard hi-fi, so like Separate's hi-fi, and like that first song, I listened to a song by the French electronic band Air, and I remember hearing it through like a really crappy amplifier, a CD player, and a pair of like bookshelf speakers. And honestly, it was like what I imagined seeing a flight of angels would be, or having like a sort of miracle revealed to you. It was like so thing, and like that tape thing, so exciting. Like I remember like making mixtapes and then doing that sort of thing. Lots of love, lots of like sort of failed love, lawn things.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I had some. Let's say I had one where we had OMD going on there. If You Leave by OMD, classic broken heart song. Yeah, I used to love doing that.
Absolutely. I still think back to one of my favourite moments at college. For the UK listeners, university moments was basically walking down the steps of a nightclub to break up with someone, while in the background was playing Tony Braxton, Unbreak My Heart. I still can't hear that song now without basically thinking like, wow, you took yourself seriously when you had more hair, Patrick. You just took yourself so seriously. But it was quite a cinematic moment, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Great song, too.
Absolute banger. I mean, whatever happened to Toni Braxton? She's disappeared.
She's probably doing her, a retirement tour somewhere in casinos around the United States.
She's probably fine.
Yeah, I'm not worried about Toni.
Tony, if you're listening, please come on the podcast. Love to hear what you're up to. Catch up and we can talk about Silk's nightclub in the ancient Viking city of York here in England. I'm sure
Silks,
she'd
what
be
a
it.
name.
It's grim, isn't it?
Yeah.
There was another one, and there's a nickname for basically university sort of students among like sort of original town residents, and they call them like toffs. And there was another nightclub called Toffs as well. So sort of like a spivvy English gentleman with their noses in the air, Keith. Yeah, just some pretty bad club names in.
Yeah,
Did you have was college a thing for
Yeah.
you?
God, we had a sports bar was the closest thing to our college called the Ram.
Right.
That was a pretty popular haunt. We had another one, I think it was called the Tiki Lounge.
Right, okay.
But my
And did
personal
either of these
favorite-
places have like sort of, did any of these have like sort of traditions or anything like that that sort of went along with them?
No, not really. Not really. Other than college kids drinking too much. I think that was the tradition.
Definitely. And you were going to say your favorite one. Sorry, I cut you off, Keith.
I cannot think of the name of it, which is a sin, but it was down on the street from where I lived my senior year, and it was a very local bar, so not a college kid bar. And me and my roommates would go, and all I remember is they had stale popcorn, shuffleboard, and cheap beer. And I lost many a night in that place.
What a dream combination, Keith.
It was
it
lovely.
sounds like
It was awesome.
Sounds like chapter 4 of my autobiography, you know. I absolutely love it. I just imagine also like a lot of college time is spent like just making fake IDs. I know that's just like probably like out of like popular culture, but it's like here in the UK, they start you at like 12. They're like, you're 12, you need to start drinking quickly and quite heavily. Whereas, and I told you just before this, I'm 16 years sober, but like you were just saying that like, it just feels like there's quite a different attitude towards alcohol in the US.
Well, yeah, I think some of my friends and I were probably more British that way then. But my fake ID was a multi-generational hand-me-down from a gentleman that I did not look anything like, other than we both had brown hair. And then it got famously lost by one of my best friends when he decided to try to use it, and he looked even less like this guy. And there it went into the ether of a local bar and never to be seen again.
Right. Well, A, thank you so much for sharing that. And B, this is where I just share that I'm at the stage now of sort of hair loss, where basically I go to the passport control when flying for business and they look at my picture and they're like, yeah, you're not the same guy. I'm like, I promise you, when I had hair, I looked exactly like this guy. They're like, yeah, you just look like a sort of angry egg. And I'm just like, I'm sorry. I'm like, it's still me. It's still this guy. They're just like, yeah, nothing. So I can relate.
I'm getting there. You just can't see it.
Okay, you've still got it. Like seriously, you're fine. Just don't shave it off. It's when it's sort of when it's a field of wheat. That was the stage I got to where it was like 3 lank strands. I was like, it's got to go.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Keith, tell me about the decision and the status quo before you made this decision. So we're going to talk about a decision, but before we get to that, we have to understand where you were before. So just give us a little quick intro and a taster to your career and where you were before you took this decision, Keith.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was kind of I was very naive, and B, I kind of came out of college wanting to do business, and I didn't know even necessarily what that meant. And so for me, I actually was very fortunate where during my senior year, there was some recruiting being done on campus for Deloitte Consulting. I didn't know what consulting was. I didn't really know much. And I had done well academically and that sort of thing. And so I made it through the process and I got hired by Deloitte Consulting. I was so naive that I didn't know what that meant. I had no idea what that meant. And in August, after my graduation, I remember being up in Seattle, which is where the office was, and sitting in a conference room and learning literally on day one that consulting meant you're likely going to be traveling full time. I had no idea. I didn't know what I was going to be doing. I didn't know how this whole thing worked. So that's kind of my starting point. And I got into basically consulting led into, I did some market research. And then I did some strategy work, additional strategy work after consulting. And I had done some marketing as well. It's funny to even call it this now, but it was technically internet marketing before the internet was a transaction place. It was an information place. And so I worked for Hollywood Video, which was the second largest video chain in the United States at the time. And I was quote unquote running internet marketing, which simply meant send you an email and somehow hope that we can put data together that shows our email maybe got you to rent something from us. Yeah, so it was a pretty varied, a pretty varied path. I would say probably the one through line there were two through lines I would say in my career. One is I'm just a curious person. I like to learn about new stuff, and I ask a ton of questions, probably annoyingly so, to people. And then the second one is I think there's an element, I never really thought about this, but there's always an element, there's a human element to a lot of my jobs are trying to figure out how to connect to humans or understand humans, right? Because consulting, at the end of the day, I'm a 21-year-old, idiot walking into conference rooms with 45-year-old professionals. Half of my job was just trying to get them to just engage, right? And so market research, where I did for 4 years and moderated, I don't know how many hundreds of focus groups around the world. All of that is just human connection. How do I get this person to feel comfortable to get an answer? And then strategy work, especially when I started strategy at Nike, I would argue strategy was 40% what the strategy was and 60% getting a matrix organization to align to it. And so to me, those are kind of two through lines that have kind of carried me through.
So fascinating. And I think let's then talk about the decision. So you have been doing this sort of, common sort of set of jobs and activities and transferable skills, but you came to this moment where you decided something. Why don't you just tell us what you decided to do, Keith?
Absolutely. And again, it's that through line of curiosity, I think, is what led it. So I was in strategy at Nike. I started in a global apparel. And again, I didn't know what I was getting into. It was great place to land because strategy was a job that kind of connected with a lot of people. And so being in apparel, I was in a product engine. And I'd never really been around product per se. I mean, I'd obviously bought products, worn products, used products, but I had never been, kind of understanding or close to how it was made. And as I got to learn that process, it just became fascinating to me. And I was doing a lot of work for basketball apparel, which was a passion for me. I love basketball. And I just made the decision that, kind of Nike was very good about having kind of career paths and lanes, that I wanted to get into product. Now in product, there's kind of four primary functions. There's product management, there's design, what we call development, kind of engineering, if you will. And then you could argue merchandising in terms of closest to the product. Well, I'm not a designer. I'm horribly uncreative. I'm definitely not a developer because that's much more engineering kind of based than I am. I'm an okay merchant at best, only because I've been around it a while. So product management, which was really kind of the marriage of consumer, market, and business need into one in managing a product line, was what I wanted to do. And so I intentionally put myself in places to learn, ask questions, asked to do stretch projects, to be involved. I probably annoyed some people being involved in things I probably had no business being involved in, but it really just was born of curiosity. And I love knowing how things are made. And so that's kind of how it started.
That's so fantastic. And I mean, one of the things we talk about in the training that we run, where we're training non-researchers how to do consumer insights so they can de-risk their product development, is this idea of saying most people spend the majority of their life in a realm that is status quo and comfort. Some people will then move to another circle, slightly smaller, which is basically learning and discomfort. And then there's a third one, which is like outright fear. And I've got to give a shout out to a great friend of Outrageous called Christy Spence, who basically introduced this in her amazing newsletter, Noticings. Check it out on Substack if you can.
I will. Yeah, I will.
But she sort of talked about this, and it's something that we've really sort of, really been inspired by and taken to heart. And I think hearing you talk about, how you moved yourself from perhaps a comfortable or maybe an uncomfortable status quo into a position of learning and some discomfort. Did you face pushback when you started to make that journey, Keith? Like, how did you sort of...
Yeah, for sure.
How did that work for you?
It worked in both probably overt and passive ways. And part of it is the context, right? I worked at Nike, the greatest sports brand, arguably, or not arguably, I believe, in the world. Again, I'm biased, but and if you think about that, working at Nike in and of itself is a pretty cool experience. But lots of people want to work in product at Nike because it's a brand house and a product engine in this beautiful marriage, right? It's phenomenal at both. And so when you're there, those are two of the marquee places to be. And so I think looking at a guy like me, I had no product background. I'd never been an associate PLM. I kind of hadn't served my time, if you will, packing up boxes of samples and, doing all that stuff. And so there was definitely, I think, you know, question or wariness about, my ability to do it and why. And because I didn't come in through the traditional route of becoming an APLM, working my way up to a PLM, I kind of came in at more of a, I don't know, not a senior level, but kind of in that middle. And that just wasn't the route people took. And so I just had to earn trust, and I had to prove people I was willing to put in the work. And one of the ways that I try to earn trust, if it's done the right way, is I just ask a lot of questions, and I admit what I don't know. And it takes a lot of, I'm sure I have plenty of ego, but you've got to be able to swallow your ego to just sit there in front of someone who might be your junior, might be at a different point in their career, might be a whole lot of things, and just say, hey, can you explain that to me? Because I don't get it. And that took a long time for me to be comfortable, right? Especially in a place like Nike, which is super type A, super competitive. Everyone's kind of putting out their peacock feathers and constantly doing their thing. And so to show any kind of vulnerability or lack of knowledge is scary. But I wasn't going to be successful if I just try to fake my way through it, because there's stuff I just didn't know.
I mean, thank you so much for sharing that, Keith. And I wonder, like, does that same like math hold now? Like now you're at a VP of product, again, at another globally renowned, tool making brand, renowned in everything from sort of first responder communities to fishing communities to so many places all around the world. Like, yeah, you've got the reps in and you're more used to showing that vulnerability, but is it harder to do it when you're now at like a really senior leadership level? Or is it just, you've just got so used to it that it's kind of, can you see where I'm going with this?
100% can see where you're going. I think this is probably a very individual answer. At this point for me, it's very easy because I'm finally, and this is probably, thank my therapist and life and all sorts of things, I'm just comfortable with who I am and what I bring to the table. It doesn't mean I'm not trying to grow. It doesn't mean I'm not trying to improve and I'm not trying to learn, but I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not. And actually one of the reasons I'm here at Leatherman when they were trying to fill this role, which is a very unique role, right? So our owner and founder and the inventor is still somewhat involved in the business, not a ton, but certainly, he's present and he should be. And then our CEO that just retired or stepped down, in January was a product engineer whose fingerprints are on all sorts of stuff. So this role, I think for certain people would have been incredibly intimidating. But what I appreciate is during the process of talking to Ben, who was our CEO, and then Tim, who's my boss, they recognized that what I bring was actually filling the gaps of what they didn't have, right? I'm not an engineer. We have the most talented engineers in the industry in spades. So they don't need another one in that sense. We've got them. We got great designers. We have great product managers. They needed someone in this role at this moment in time for this company to pull those things together in a certain way. And those are the skills that I have, right? I'm never going to be an engineer. I ask a ton of questions of the engineers. They probably think I'm an absolute idiot. And they know now, though, it's not that I'm doing it to question their work because I can't. I just want to understand, because that understanding might help us make a different decision, that I can impact. And so I'm very comfortable with it now. 10 years ago, me, not at all. It was really hard for me to do.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Keith. And it's also so interesting because we have worked with a number of different engineering sort of clients, and you sometimes see, engineers who are incredibly expert and knowledgeable on their product.
Yes.
But where you then ask them to like talk about empathy and building rapport with a consumer, and it's like, you've asked them to sort of walk on the moon or something,
Yes.
without a spacesuit. And it's just so fascinating to us because, I remember one client saying, I've spoken more about empathy in the last day and a half of this training than I have in the last 50 years of my life.
Yes. No, I love that. As you go through life, you pick up these cliches or these mantras. And One of mine has been for quite a while now, I think, it's been curiosity. Just coaching people, coaching myself, first of all, and second, trying to coach others to remain curious. Over the last couple of years, I actually refined that a little bit to remind myself and others that it's not just curiosity, it's empathetic curiosity, not judgmental curiosity. Because in my opinion, you can come at things in one of those two routes. Judgmental curiosity is, I want to ask you questions because I want to be able to judge the decisions you made. That's not the healthiest way. Empathetic curiosity is, I want to ask because I want to understand where you're coming from. And if I better understand where you're coming from, I might be able to better relate to you or better help you. And so there's a nuance. It's two sides of the same coin. I think one is much more powerful and helpful than the other. And so that, to hear you say empathy is, I use that word all the time. Frankly, if the world had a little more of it right now, we'd be in better shape.
And in fact, there's another sort of interesting thing. I don't know if you've come across like the 5 levels of listening model, but it's one again that we sort of teach and talk about, and it's so interesting. It just says that there's a sort of an ever deeper level of listening that can occur between individuals or groups, and the first level is very much. I'll send you some stuff afterwards,
Yeah,
but
please
it's basically saying the first level is very much surface level. Second level is very much like listening to rebut and just be like, the other guy's a jackass.
Yes.
And then it's right down to like the 5th level, where what you're trying to do is to actually understand like worldview and perspectives and emotions and emotional history and emotional intelligence. And I think, again, it's like, I think it's TV character Ted Lasso who said, be curious, not judgmental. And I think, again, it's one that just you can laugh about, but sometimes popular culture just really captures the moment where you're like, that just makes total sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, popular cultures, you generally got a finger on the pulse, if you will. And so, I would love to learn more about the 5 levels. I think that's incredibly helpful for teams, for individuals. I think it's also one of those things that you have to remind yourself to check yourself on it, right? Like, where am I listening? What level am I at right now? Like, am I in a meeting? Yeah, exactly, right? Am I in this meeting just waiting for that person to talk because I want to show that I'm smarter than them, or I want to get back at them for some decision, you know what I mean? Or am I truly trying to understand? We try to apply this a lot to the consumer work that we're doing. And we're doing a lot of work right now to kind of help ourselves become what I call more outside in versus inside out. And there's a lot of debate around the best way to do that in terms of mining observations and turning them into insights and everything. And it's always a blend of art and science, in my opinion. But a lot of it, in my opinion, is just observing and trying to understand where that human's coming from. And there's there is an art to doing that. And it starts with being genuinely curious who they are and where they're coming from.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, there was a 2022 survey from one of the big market research platforms, Qualtrics. They surveyed over 20,000 sort of consumers in 20 plus countries. And what they estimated was that basically companies failing to move from consumer sort of delivery to consumer delight were basically leaving an estimated $4.7 trillion on the table each year, just because companies think we can do the bare minimum. We can build sludge in, we can make returns difficult, we can make X, Y, and Z difficult. And it's interesting, I was just looking at I can't remember whether it was Instagram account or LinkedIn, but you had a fantastic video where people had sent in, excuse my language, like messed up sort of Leathermans. And some of them looked like they had literally been sort of blown up in a sort of, attack of some sort of horrific nature. And it'd be like, the sort of pliers were missing, half of the handles were missing. And the person talking was just like, yeah, we can fix this, no problem. And it sort of reminded me of that Monty Python thing, it's just like, only a flesh wound, sir, and he's sort of missing a leg and this sort of thing.
Yeah, no, I what's fun about working here is we take great pride in doing just that, like trying to help that experience be good for someone. Our whole mantra is about being useful, right? As a brand, we want to be useful to people, and useful has a million different contexts and definitions and applications, right? And sometimes useful is as simple as quickly opening an Amazon package because it has something you need at the moment, to useful can be incredibly serious and life-saving and cutting someone out of a seatbelt or fixing, so it's not our job to judge what useful is for you. It's our job to ensure that you have something that you can be useful with. And so if we need to fix that thing, because whatever useful looked like for you, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, and it's almost as if the consumer is the useful one and the tool is the enabler.
100%. That's exactly like what we really think about it is everyone has usefulness in them. Our job is to provide a tool that allows that to come out, right? I can't make you useful. I could give you a tool that allows you to be useful.
I heard somebody who had been had spoken out in a really difficult situation. They were on the radio here in the UK, and they said this beautiful phrase. They said, "Everyone is only one step away from a heroic act." And I just absolutely loved that. I thought, I was nearly crying when I heard it, Keith. I thought it was so beautiful. And I think what you're saying is like, if that person, and let's give a shout out to the Portland sort of tool making community, because there's quite a few great brands around you, aren't there? But like, if you've got a Leatherman or a Gerber or whatever on your belt at that moment, your ability to be even more useful in those moments is even more acute.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we celebrate those. And again, they vary in severity and seriousness. We call them tool tales. And we celebrate every month. We have an all employee meeting and we share at least one tool tale. And these are not solicited things. These are things and stories that come into us just from consumers. And for instance, the one we just had this week was a farmer found an owl trapped in a fence. And now the sad part was the owl had already gotten to the chickens, but this farmer still used his Leatherman to release the owl back. And, is that the most important heroic act in the world right now? No, but he was useful. And to that owl, he was pretty heroic.
Definitely. Shout out to Plop the Barn Owl. The Owl Who Was Afraid of the Dark, a book that I used to both love and be absolutely terrified by in equal measure as a child. It's so interesting as well hearing you talk about the sort of reuse and recycle and like sort of giving new life to product. And I'm really intrigued from Leatherman's perspective, because the thing is, it's, my perspective, not yours. It's not an inexpensive purchase, but once you've bought it, you've basically got it for life.
Yep.
And there is this whole movement of sort of buy it once, buy it for life. And I wonder how you sort of still continue to like deliver financial results for a brand like Leatherman, but with something that just so rarely goes wrong, Keith. Like, how do you just, without getting into all the sort of trade secrets, but like, how do you manage that sort of, that pressure? Because you've almost built too good a product.
Yeah, no, it's funny. We talk about all the time, right? We don't have built-in obsolescence, right? I think it's, and maybe I'm oversimplifying, I think it's as simple as two things. One, anyone that knows our brand, I can make you a pretty passionate argument that you should own at least 4 Leatherman, right? So one in your junk drawer.
Yeah, I need a Micra next. That's my next one.
Oh, they're great. Yeah. I carry a Micra every day, right? So one in your junk drawer, one in your toolbox, one in whatever your activity is, camping, hiking, boat, it doesn't matter, right? And then I would argue one in your car. And if, so I can get you now. So does everyone that already owns a Leatherman own 4? No. So we've got some work to do to get you to 4, right? So I got 3 more that I need to get you into. But then, as powerful as our brand is and as recognized as the name is, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have been purchased by all those same people. So how do we continue to bring more people into the brand? It's a classic, how do I take you from awareness to conversion? And one of our jobs right now, I think, is to go back to what we were talking about, and improve our empathy to understand what useful looks like to new and other people and build them product that allows them to be useful. And there's a tremendous amount of growth that we can get from just that, right? We don't need to get into drinkware or do massive category expansion. We're really good at the categories we're in. We might selectively pick other ones over time that are very adjacent, but we have a massive opportunity to grow, just letting more people into our brand and frankly, just going a little bit deeper with those that are already with us.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. I mean, you see, some of the analogous brands that I think of when I think of Leatherman, particularly Go Ruck, for example, who make the really high-end backpacks. Again, like not an inexpensive purchase, but they've got a lifetime guarantee if it gets blown up or destroyed, they'll fix it back in their factory in the US. They've got some onshore manufacture of those in the continental US. But it's interesting you saying about like still playing within the same categories. And I guess just as a bit of a taster, without revealing trade secrets, but like where could you sort of see, because you see, for example, like I interviewed the VP or the former VP of product at Fjällräven the other day, the Swedish outdoor brand, and they've obviously, both been making garments that you buy and last forever, but then they've also been doing sort of expeditions where they take people into Arctic and polar environments.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm wondering like where you see the sort of edges as to how far out a brand like Leatherman could actually expand, Keith.
It's a great question. I would say it's one that we're in the middle of deeply exploring, and I think what's interesting though too is the juxtaposition of what role, the changing dynamic of what role a brand can play for someone. I do believe that there is realities to how far a brand can stretch. I don't know that we know that about ourselves yet. It's probably a little bit further than we are right now. I don't know that we're going to get into certain, types of products because I just don't think we could credibly do it. But I would just, if I'm being completely honest, I don't know that we know the answer to that yet. I think the edges are probably a little further than we think, but we've got to be thoughtful about which edge we go toward. And again, for us though, it's going to always be guided by, can we credibly make you a high quality, durable product or service, potentially? I think that's an interesting realm. We've talked about that a lot internally, that we can live up to what we want to stand for, which is being useful for you in a way that is reliable and won't let you down. So I know that
resonates with the consumer and resonates.
100%. And, I know that sounded like a very corporate-y, cliche kind of non-answer, but it's just,
trust me, Keith, journey. I will basically be the first to tell you if we get to that stage. Trust me, I will absolutely do that. I'll do that for you. In fact, I'll do that for anyone, Keith.
Well, thank you.
Oh, it's absolutely great. And it's so fascinating. And I think you see some brands who have been in that sort of buy once, buy for life space, and then have just had the most ill-considered sort of, brand or product or category or line extensions. And you're just like, why the hell have you suddenly gone into like inflatable stand-up paddle boards? I'm just throwing out a stupid example here, but it's crazy why you would damage a brand in that way. I'm not saying that you are, but I'm just...
Without going into it, I'll just tell you I have personal experience with that exact approach. But, I think what's the beauty of our situation and why I love working here is being privately held and family owned. We always have the ability to do what's right. You know what I mean? And so we're not going to compromise principles. We're not going to compromise values. We're not going to compromise who we are as a brand, because we don't have to deliver every 90 days some quarterly report to investors. You know what I mean? And there's benefits to that as well, but it just allows us to be, I would argue, more thoughtful and more planful. And our owners, Tim and the Leatherman family are truly, we could not ask for better owners. They give us the freedom and the flexibility and the support that we need, because they know that we're going to adhere to and respect the principles and kind of the values that Tim created and others have carried on. So it's really, as a product guy, it's a great situation. I will also say this, it's an incredibly daunting situation to see and talk to, a couple times a week, the guy who invented a category, and then sit in the seat that's supposed to figure out what the next thing is, right? Like that's a good challenge every day.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned to you before, and listeners, if you haven't read this book, I really recommend it. There's a book all about the Lockheed Skunk Works, and again, there was a very famous sort of aeronautical engineer who'd started this sort of like innovation lab for Lockheed, and had built like the Constellation and various other planes that literally dominated the world in the 50s and 60s, and played a critical role in like America supporting the victory in World War II. They then brought this new guy in, and he was just sitting there going like, oh my God, where do I go next? And the thing that really struck me with that story was that the new guy, whose name I've forgotten, but I'll put it in the show notes, he basically just said, okay, well, we're going to be respectful of the past, but we can't be sort of, just totally hidebound by the past. We'll respect the principles, but the product will end up looking quite different. And one of the very first products they made was the U-2 spy plane, subsequently got shot down over Russia. Yeah. But then the second one he built was the stealth fighter. And basically all of the engineers, all the old school engineers apparently absolutely hated this guy because they were like, it basically looks like 3 equilateral triangles. Basically, it doesn't look anything like what a plane is supposed to look like. It's the ugliest thing I've ever seen. The pilot is sitting there like absolutely freezing his bits off. This is a horrible plane. But they were like, yeah, we can build this and we can sell loads to the CIA. And then they were just like, yeah, all right, fine, you were right. But like the amount of pushback. So I think the point I'm making is it feels like a lot of people that come into these legacy positions and legacy brands and seats feel exactly the same and yet still able to change the world, Keith. So please keep going.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I agree with you completely. And this is where I believe that life works the way it's supposed to work, whatever that means. And I think about, like we were talking earlier, I think 10 years ago could not have handled this situation, hopefully, as well as I'm handling it now. And so certainly not perfectly, I'll tell you that. No. I'm sure my team would tell you the same thing. It just, ego, perspective, time, experience, all those things, I believe, have set me up at this moment in time for this opportunity. And I'm grateful for that. And we'll see what we can go do. The good thing is, it's really, I have the easiest job in a lot of ways because we have an incredibly talented team. So my job is to figure out where to focus, how to prioritize, give them resources, and then frankly, just get the hell out of their way. And I have no doubt we'll come up with some pretty cool stuff.
Well, our time is nearly over, Keith. I mean, I can't believe that it's only taken us 13 iterations. Honestly, if you had seen, dear listener, the amount of emails that I've had to send to Keith, Keith has been a total professional and consummate gentleman. So thank you, Keith. But
of course, seriously, my pleasure.
Every time I've been like, yeah, sorry, the thing is down. Yeah, I've been like checking the status reports, and it's still like showing like global outage, this sort of thing. And you've been so generous. So thank you so much.
Oh, of course, no problem.
Just final question then to you, Keith. This is kind of your chance just to share any sort of key tasks or questions that are in your mind or on your docket at the moment with the audience and ask for their help. And I wondered if there was anything, it could be anything from personal to professional, but just a kind of a chance for you to sort of share anything that you might need. I don't know if you've got open roles or if there are, how you like people to connect with you, or there's a sort of non-profit you're working with, whatever it is that you're particularly passionate about at the moment.
That's a big invitation. I mean, I'll probably go a little more, I guess, selfishly for Leatherman on that one, but we're always interested to kind of go back to what we're talking about. I would like to constantly understand what useful looks like to other people, right? And because that's such a key input for us, right? Meaning I always want product feedback. But we tend to get a lot of it, which is good. So we'll always take product feedback. But I think selfishly, we just want to continue understanding in today's changing world and changing environment and with changing activities, what does useful look like? What would you want to have every day? I mean, we joke here all the time that really the ultimate multi-tool has become the phone, and we're not going to get into phones. I can tell you that, but there's other forms of useful. And so in whatever format that looks like, hyper curious to know what that is for different people.
Yeah, I love that. And I know from other clients that we've worked with that they often have like sort of, both consumer feedback programs, but then they also have like sort of open innovation platforms or calls and that sort of thing. Like, how do ideas get into your innovation pipeline if they're not generated internally within Leatherman, Keith? How does that work? Is there a process?
No, I mean, I think that's one thing that we're working on is how to do that a little bit more intentionally. I mean, right now it's probably very traditionally and it's organic. It's everything from customer service calls to emails to Instagram posts to LinkedIn. I get a bunch just via LinkedIn, and so do other people. One of the things we've been talking about is how do we add a little bit more structure to that? Not like trying to control the ideas, but to give a more structured avenue for people to provide that feedback. So I don't have a good, beautiful answer for you at the moment, but in the meantime, until we figure that out, however people want to reach out, please do. And we literally, customer service we have an email inbox that any idea that comes in gets shared with our entire design, engineering, and product management team. So we just get emails that, and it's just verbatim from the consumer. So that's one way that we definitely get ideas.
I love that. And now my curious brain is just wondering what the craziest idea of, because like some of the clients like we work with, they're just like, right, so what we need to be doing is building like sort of clothes for dogs. And it's just like, yeah, we're a global apparel brand. We're not going to be doing that.
I would say 43 years into it, if you can think of any use case for a tool, potentially, we've probably been asked to make it at this point.
Definitely. Like, have you got a tool that can basically remove the sort of the spiky bit on the top of the pineapple?
Okay, exactly.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah. We get incredibly specific use cases that people are looking for.
Well, Keith, we've done it. We've freaking done it. Like, seriously, should we just high five ourselves?
Yes, there we go.
Yes.
Nice job.
Thank you so much for your time and your energy. And as always, I always have to ask guests, please stay on the line, because otherwise, if we just get off the line, then basically everything breaks down and all of this wonderful conversation will have been for nothing. Listeners, this is where we leave you. Keith, thank you again. You've been a fantastic guest.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.